Alia sat in the back corner of the library, her head buried in her arms, eyes heavy with tears she was too proud to let fall. Her textbooks lay open in front of her, their pages blurred with highlighted passages, sticky notes, and scribbled equations that no longer made sense. Outside, the sun was setting in a brilliant mix of orange and gold, casting long shadows over the campus courtyard. But Alia barely noticed. She had hit her breaking point, and for the first time in her life, she seriously considered giving up. 2 months ago, Alia had been full of hope. A scholarship student from a small town, she had fought her way into one of the most prestigious universities in the country. Everyone back home believed in her. Her teachers had hugged her goodbye. Her neighbors had chipped in for her dorm essentials. And her father, who had worked double shifts at the factory, had given her the only watch he owned and told her to never stop climbing. But here she was now drowning in assignments, failing quizzes, and shrinking with every passing day. Her classmates spoke in confident tones she couldn't match. They answered questions she didn't even understand. They talked about internships, research projects, and networking events like second nature. And she was just trying to survive the next deadline. Her phone buzzed beside her. It was her mother again, the third time she had called that day. Alia didn't answer. She didn't want to hear that gentle voice asking if everything was all right, because she didn't know how to lie anymore. She didn't know how to say, "I'm okay," when she wasn't. Suddenly, someone slid into the chair beside her. It was Mr. Rahman, her old high school English teacher. But that couldn't be right. He lived 5 hours away. She blinked in confusion, and then realized it wasn't him, it was Professor Chen, her writing instructor. Alia straightened up quickly, wiping her eyes and forcing a tight smile. "Didn't mean to scare you," Professor Chen said softly, glancing at the chaos of notes on the table. "You've been in here every evening this week." Alia gave a small nod, trying to seem composed. "Just trying to catch up." Professor Chen looked at her for a moment longer, then reached into her bag and pulled out a worn paperback book. She slid it across the table toward Alia. "You remind me of the author," she said. "Smart, quiet, on the edge of burnout." Alia looked down. The book was called The Unseen Mountain, by someone she didn't recognize. She opened it to the inside cover and saw a handwritten message. "To anyone who's ever felt like quitting, keep going. It gets better, I promise." "Who was she?" Alia asked. Professor Chen smiled. "A student of mine years ago. She almost dropped out in her second year. Thought she wasn't good enough. Thought she didn't belong. What happened? She stayed. Slowly, painfully. She rewrote her entire thesis 3 times. Worked part-time. Spent more nights in the library than in her dorm. But she kept showing up. One day, things clicked. Not all at once, but piece by piece." Alia nodded but didn't speak. Her throat was tight again. Professor Chen leaned closer. "Everyone here struggles, Alia. The ones who look the most confident. They're battling their own doubts. You think you're the only one failing, but trust me, half your classmates are pretending just as hard as you are." Alia finally let a tear slip down her cheek. She wasn't sure if it was from exhaustion or relief. "Can I tell you something?" the professor continued. "It's not your intelligence that defines you here. It's your grit, your decision to try again tomorrow, and the next day. That's what makes people succeed in this place." She stood, gathering her bag. "Read the book, then go home and rest. Not quit. Rest." Alia nodded again, this time more firmly. That night, lying in bed with the book open on her chest, Alia read the first few chapters. They weren't academic, or polished, or even perfect, but they were raw, honest. Each page echoed thoughts she hadn't dared to say aloud, about pressure, about loneliness, about the terrifying thought that maybe she wasn't enough. And yet, every page also carried something else. Hope. Just enough to hold on to. The next morning, Alia woke up before sunrise. The air was still cold, and the sky hadn't turned blue yet. But something inside her had shifted. She didn't feel better. She didn't feel stronger. But she didn't feel broken anymore either. In her first class, she raised her hand for the first time in weeks. Her answer wasn't perfect, but it was heard. During her break, she visited the writing lab and booked a session for feedback. That evening, She emailed her advisor and asked for help organizing her semester. Bit by bit, day by day, Alia started rebuilding. She still struggled. Some nights she cried herself to sleep. Some days she bombed her quizzes, but she kept going. And strangely, as she started showing up with honesty, others started reaching out to her too. One afternoon, as she was waiting outside the computer lab, a boy named Theo turned to her. "Hey," he said, "you're an intro to stats, right? You understand what's going on in there." "Because I don't." Alia blinked, surprised. He always looked so composed, but his voice was genuinely confused. She hesitated. "I don't really get it either, but maybe we can figure it out together." And so they did, not just that week, but many more after. Together, they shared textbooks, swapped notes, and slowly built a study group that grew from 2 to 6 students. And in that group, Alia realized something profound. Everyone had a breaking point. Everyone had almost quit. One evening, as their group packed up, Theo asked, "Did you ever think of leaving?" Alia paused, looking around the study table where just weeks ago she used to sit alone. "Yeah," she said, "almost did." "What changed?" Alia looked down at the worn book she still carried in her bag. Then she smiled. "Someone reminded me that struggling doesn't mean you're not smart. It just means you're human." Meanwhile, back in her hometown, Alia's father still worked long hours. Every night, he stared at his old flip phone, waiting for a message from her. He didn't always understand what she was studying, but he understood the silence in her voice. So when her messages began to carry life again, when she sent a photo of her in her study group, laughing with pizza boxes scattered around, a smile returned to his face. And Alia's mother, who had spent countless nights worrying, began sleeping through the night again. The climb wasn't over. Finals were coming. Internships loomed. And uncertainty still lingered. But Alia no longer feared it. Because now she knew. Strength wasn't about never falling. It was about getting back up. Even when your legs were shaking. Even when no one was watching. Especially then. Finals week crept in like a storm, slow at first, then suddenly everywhere. Alia found herself buried in schedules, review notes, and coffee-stained index cards. But this time, it felt different. The pressure hadn't vanished, and the fear still whispered late at night, but now she had tools to fight back. She mapped out her days with color-coded to-do lists. She set small goals. She took breaks without guilt. And when it all got too much, she'd take a walk to the old bench near the fountain and read a few lines from The Unseen Mountain. That book, with its battered cover and highlighted phrases, had become her anchor. One evening, just 3 days before her toughest exam, her laptop crashed. Not a slow glitch or a blue screen, but a full-on blackout. Everything she'd written, weeks of preparation, gone in a blink. At first, she stared blankly at the black screen, her pulse rising like a drum. Then she stood up, walked straight to the ID department, and explained what happened, voice shaking but firm. They couldn't recover the files, but they offered a loaner laptop. She thanked them, then sat in the hallway and cried, but only for 10 minutes. Then she opened a fresh document and began again, one word at a time. Later that night, Theo texted her. "Still up?" She replied with a simple thumbs up. Within minutes, he showed up outside her dorm with 2 instant noodle cups and a Snickers bar. No words, no pity, just company. And that was enough. When exam day arrived, Alia didn't feel confident, but she felt ready. She took a deep breath and walked into the lecture hall, sat in the middle row, and stared at the paper with calm determination. For once, her mind didn't freeze. It flowed. She didn't get everything right, but she finished. She did her best. And when she walked out into the bright sunlight afterward, she didn't cry, she smiled. A real, earned, exhausted smile. Weeks later, the results were posted. Alia stared at her grades with wide eyes. She didn't just pass, she improved. Drastically. Her writing professor left a note on her essay. Sharp insights. Keep pushing. And her stats final, the one she had feared the most, showed a grade higher than she'd dreamed. She called her mom that night. "Ma," she said, voice shaking, "I didn't quit." There was a pause. Then her mother whispered through happy tears, "I knew you wouldn't." Alia didn't tell her the full story, not yet. About the nights she almost packed her bags. About the failures, the panic attacks, the books she stared at without understanding. But she would. One day, when the words were ready. Instead, she ended the call and sat by her window, watching the stars emerge one by one. She realized something powerful then. Success wasn't a straight road, it was a rocky mountain path, with cliffs, slips, and breathtaking views. And the people who made it to the top weren't always the smartest or the strongest, they were simply the ones who refused to stop climbing. The next semester, Alia became something she never expected. A mentor. She volunteered at the university's support center to help freshmen struggling with adjustment. During one session, a shy girl named Rena sat beside her, looking lost and scared just like Alia had been. "I'm failing already," Rena whispered. "Maybe this place just isn't for people like me." Alia gently smiled, reached into her bag, and handed Rena a book. It was The Unseen Mountain. "I thought the same once," Alia said. "But it turns out, the people who look like they belong are often just better at hiding their fear." "You're not alone." Rena blinked. "Did you ever think of quitting?" Alia nodded slowly. "More times than I can count. But every time I almost did, something or someone pulled me back." They sat in silence, the weight of shared struggle hanging gently between them. That spring, Alia applied for an internship with a competitive media firm. She never thought she'd get it. But 2 weeks later, an email arrived. "We'd like to offer you a position." She didn't scream. She didn't jump. She just closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Thank you," to the universe. But even then, her journey wasn't over. One morning during the internship, she was asked to write a feature about resilience in education. The topic? What to tell students who feel like giving up. It hit her hard. For hours, she sat at her desk, fingers hovering above the keyboard. Then slowly, the words came. Not perfect, not polished, but real. She wrote about the girl who cried in the library, who questioned everything, who felt like an imposter among geniuses. She wrote about failure, about shame, about the hidden pressure to be perfect. But mostly, she wrote about showing up even when it hurts. The article was published the next month. It went viral. Emails began flooding her inbox from students across the country. One message read, "I was about to drop out until I read your piece. I didn't know anyone else felt this way." Alia read it 3 times, then cried, because she had once needed those same words herself. By the time she graduated, Alia had earned more than just a degree. She earned scars and strength, humility and confidence, pain and perspective. And she carried all of it with her as she stepped onto the graduation stage, her family cheering in the stands, her father holding up a handmade sign that read, "Still climbing." When her name was called, she walked proudly across that stage, her tassels swinging, her heart full, not because she had conquered everything, but because she had refused to quit. After the ceremony, she took a moment to sit on the library steps, the very spot where she had once nearly broken. She opened her bag, pulled out The Unseen Mountain, and smiled at the faded message inside. "To anyone who's ever felt like quitting, keep going. It gets better, I promise." She gently closed the book and whispered, "You were right." Then she stood, lifted her face to the sun, and walked forward into her future carrying the lesson she would never forget. The most powerful thing a student can do is not give up.